And Susan Walters, our senior VP, has come in. Caesar Zaldivar Motz has wandered in and out. He's with the Southeast Community Corporation and the Los Angeles Consortium. I think we have been very fortunate that Secretary Ramos has spent all this time with us, but I think you would agree, Carlos, this is an amazing collection of leaders from throughout California. I mean, every corner, and it's a wonderful asset for you to be able to tap into. And you heard the amount of expertise and also the personal insights to the challenges. And of course, it's not a hidden agenda that we asked everybody to say what you take personal responsibility for, because that's sort of the way that we move things forward. And I actually thought, Nancy, when you talked about herding cats, I just want to say I grew up on a dairy farm. I did herd cats. And it was always easier if you put out the milk. And so the California Advanced Services Fund and the if you will, seed capital, that little bit of investment, I think, Carlos, is one of the opportunities that we've got in California that other states don't. Another asset we have is Secretary Carlos Ramos. Carlos has a very impressive background in technology in California, in the state of California, working for the state of California. He today is Secretary of the California Technology Agency. CTA did not exist when we began all of this work 5 years ago. So in part, the importance of technology, broadband, et cetera, got promoted to the place of having a cabinet position, a secretary of an agency on the governor's cabinet. Carlos also was the head of the Teal Data Center, and then we consolidated Teal with data processing in Health and Human Services, and he became an assistant secretary at Health and Human Services. He has been responsible for overseeing a whole lot of the retooling of systems to support human services, social services. And as now Secretary of the California Technology Agency, really jumped in, I think, and took great interest and responsibility for the whole area of broadband and broadband adoption, and is heading up an exciting effort around digital literacy. And I am so pleased that we were finally able to align, you know, all the stars aligned. Your calendar was open to be here today. You could hear everybody. I think you agree there is $200,000 worth of consultancy sitting here in this room. So ladies and gentlemen, we are just absolutely honored and thrilled that we could be at this point in time, at this event, have all of you here, and also be joined by Secretary Carlos Ramos. Will you please give a warm welcome to Secretary Ramos. Do you want to use this, or you just...
Oh, I know.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking you all for the opportunity to be here and address all of you. And Sunny's right, you are an impressive group. So I want to thank you for inviting me to address you. I also want to thank you, first of all, for your commitment as part of individual organizations to closing the digital divide, and as a collective group here, but also for the personal commitments that each of you made. They're very inspiring. I'd actually brought mine with me, so if it's okay, I'll start off by reading my personal commitment. So as Sunny said, my title is Secretary for Technology for the state of California, and as a regional leader, in my case, my region being California, my personal commitment and responsibility is to support and promote government technology projects which address issues of the digital divide and promote inclusion of all constituents of California. And then also to try and educate my colleagues up in Sacramento. So in that regard, I'm going to need a lot of your help to do that. So let me tell you, I want to give you a choice here. I had prepared a presentation, but I haven't timed it, but I'm sure it's kind of long. I could go through the presentation, or we can just ask questions, because I know, I don't want to take us too far off the schedule here. What's your preference? Would you rather just address a few questions and ask me, have me address questions, or go through the actual presentation?
I was thinking half the slides, if
Sure.
Why don't you kick it off, Carlos? Because I think if you have the time, we would love to have the benefit of as much of your perspectives as possible, and then the opportunity to do some questions and answers would be, I think, very, very helpful.
Okay. Well, I'll do that, and I'll try and go through it real quickly. Let me just tell you what I intended to do here. I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the technology agency and the work that we do. Talk a little bit about the things that we look at from within government as we make decisions about where do we invest in technology. What are the things that we look at, the sort of statistics and trends that we see going on in the public. Next, talk a little bit about some of the challenges that are particular to government, but I imagine also apply to many of you as well. And then end up with giving you a little bit of just highlighting and showcasing some of the efforts that we think that we're very proud of either initiatives or actual accomplishments that we've done within government in the area of technology, which we think go towards addressing the digital divide. And then I'm going to end on a commercial. So I'll get to the commercial later. So let me start by talking to you a little bit about some of the things that we look at within government. As Sunny said, I head up the technology agency, and our technology agency has a couple of different areas of responsibility. First and foremost, we provide policy and oversight and leadership where we can to the state in terms of managing its technology portfolio. The other half of our agency also provides technology services to enable those sorts of technology initiatives that we review and approve. So we run data centers, we run a public safety communications office which serves and supports all the dispatch centers out in the different regions of the state. So some of the things that we look at as we start to make decisions about technology and where government puts its money is what does our public look like from a technology perspective? And as you can see from here, California, this isn't just specific to California, but this is across the country, really. These are national statistics. But California is a fairly technology-savvy populace. You know, if you look at the ownership of desktop PCs and laptop PCs, the one telling statistic that we look at in here, though, is the use of mobile phones and mobile technologies. That's one that, if you look at the national trends, California is actually above the national trends. Here it says 85% of American adults own a mobile phone. In California, that number is actually 93% of adults. So it's pretty high. And just out of curiosity, how many of you actually have a mobile phone? So pretty much bears out the statistics. Here's something kind of revealing about that for us in government. Folks use mobile phones for more than just making telephone calls. How many of you actually use your phone specifically and only for phone calls? Really? Never had a text message on it? Never did GPS on it?
We need broadband. Yeah,
okay, well, there you go. And you've never taken a photo with your phone. Can somebody look at his phone? So, you know, in government, we look at that and we say, okay, so folks have a great affinity in use for their phone. In fact, some of the things that I think are evidence of that are those final two statistics there. These are actually real surveys that have been done where they played the game Would You Rather. And the game is, would you rather give up your mobile phone or give up caffeine? How many of you would sign up for that? Not too many, just one. How many of you, would you rather give up chocolate than your mobile phone? There's a couple. To us, what that tells us in government is mobile phones and mobile technologies are pretty much the wave of the future. These are some interesting statistics just from this year in terms of what mobile traffic has transpired on Black Friday. If you look at the statistics there, we had almost three times as much transactions going on Black Friday over mobile phones or mobile traffic than last year. And if you look at PayPal Mobile, that was a 500% increase, over a 500% increase, and almost $10 billion worth of expenditures. Again, in government, that tells us it's a mobile world. You know, if we're looking at how do we in government use technology to serve our constituents, we really have to look at the issue of mobile technologies. That last statistics. Now, this might be a group that's a little bit beyond this, but how many of you actually know what Angry Birds are? How many? Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you have it on your mobile device? How many of you are playing it right now? There's at least one. I did see Daryl's. You know, you should ask Daryl to show you the back of his phone. I saw it when he had it on there. I think he's probably like a grand champ at this thing. But it does tell you, folks are stuck to their mobile phones. If you need further proof, check out these statistics. 22% of Americans would rather give up their toothbrush than their mobile phone. And 33% would rather forgo sex than mobile phones. So, okay, a couple of things to say about these two statistics. The first thing to know about this is these folks probably were not from California. And then secondly, you know, if they were the ones that answered the first one up there, the chances of number 2 happening for them was pretty remote anyway, so who knows how much of a sacrifice it really was. But it does tell us in government that technology has changed. It's changed the paradigm, and I hate that word paradigm, but I couldn't think of a better one. But it really has changed the way things are in society and in the public that we serve. I want to play for you a little video that we use in government to educate our colleagues, not only the folks that run the different technology shops in the different agencies, but also the folks that make decisions about government services and government programs. And to us, it's a really telling video. Probably to the folks in this room, most of the information in this video is going to be pretty, stuff. It's not going to be news to you. But to me, it was very telling. And let me see if I can get this to play here. And I apologize in advance for the music. Did I turn this off? Did I do that? There we go. Some interesting information in that video. And for us that are in the public sector and the government sector, it really tells us, it's telling us that our constituency has changed. And I'm going to show you just a couple of simple examples here. You know, if we look at the telephone, you know, some of us will remember the old rotary telephones, and essentially with a telephone back when I was a kid, you had one in your house, you know, if your parents made enough money. If not, you went to a public phone, and some folks from previous generations, you might have had a community telephone. You know, they became gradually more and more compact and more mobile, but nowadays, folks carry cell phones around just like they would carry a watch in previous days, and it's used for a lot more than just telephone calls. The point is that through the use of technology, it's giving people greater mobility, it's giving people greater control over their environment and how they use technology and access to different services that weren't there in the past. Here's another example, and I heard somebody yell the word or say something about 8-tracks over here a minute ago. The way we listen to music, think about it. When I was young, first of all, how many of you are familiar with 8-tracks? You guys remember those? So, you know, I was looking at technology now, musical technology, right? iPods. You know, nowadays you have accessories like headphones and skins and different little shells you could put on them. How many of you remember the accessories for an 8-track? Let's see how well you actually know this stuff. You remember it? It was a very critical piece of accessory. What was it?
I remember on Channel 13 when I was a child, that KTEL used to have that little thing with not this big.
Oh, the little boombox type of thing?
The thing stuck in there, you could carry it or you carry it on your shoulder.
The boombox? That was an important one, but that wasn't the most important one. Another guess?
The book of matches that you had to put in?
Absolutely. It was a little piece of paper that you folded and stuck on the side so the thing wouldn't skip. Right? I remember them. I didn't own them myself. My older brothers did. But I mean, if you think about it, you know, when I was growing up, if you wanted to listen to music, you know, I happen to be a big fan of Santana. I had to wait for the radio to play it. If I wanted to hear Santana on my own terms, I had to go out and buy an album and play it on or a 45 and hope that they had the right song on the 45, right? And then eventually you got to cassette tapes and 8-tracks where you could take them in your car or in a little Walkman. Nowadays, you can program a whole radio station to listen to the music you want when you want it. And, you know, an 8-track would have, maybe 8, 10 songs? Maybe if it was a double album, 20 songs? You know, nowadays, how many songs can an iPod hold? Thousands. And they don't all have to be rock. You can mix them up in any way that you want. Same thing with photography, right? How many of you remember the cameras? right there on the far left there. The Polaroid, right? Those were our digital cameras of the day. And how many of you remember when the big issue was, is Fujifilm better or Kodak film better? Right? I was talking to my daughter about that. She's 21 years old, and she's like, film? What's film? Try explaining a photo mart to them, or those little box stores that used to go in the parking lot of the Safeway, and you drop your film and come back in a week. The point is, technology is making it so that consumers can have services or their interests met on their terms and on their at their convenience. Here's another example: social media. Social media is changing the way that the public dialogues with each other, the way that they connect with each other. I have my kids, that have Facebook accounts. They have Google. They use Skype. I have like a 72-year-old mother-in-law who connects with her sister on the East Coast using Skype. The days of writing letters and mailing them and those sorts of things are gone. And I'll give you a personal example here. I had someone very close to me who had a pretty serious operation not too long ago. And so, this person is very loved by all members of the family and friends and everything. All kinds of people were wanting to know, how's she doing? How did the operation go? Is she home from the hospital? How's it going? This and that. I was able to leverage social technologies to set up essentially a little web page where I was able to keep people informed and say, hey, things are going good. Surgery went well. Think we get home from the hospital, results of tests, that sort of stuff. In the absence of that, I would have been dealing with probably dozens of phone calls and people stopping by, at really inconvenient times to come in and check in the hotel, or the hotel, but the hospital, to see how things were going. But this really changed the way that we were able to keep people informed. And everybody that was able to be there, they were able to send their messages, post messages of concern, and feel like they were included. So many people wrote on there, thank you for keeping us there. It makes us feel like we're part of what's going on. So these sorts of technologies are not just changing things on a personal level, but also in terms of changing things at a global level. Think of the things, some of the events of recent times, such as the whole Occupy movement. Much of that has been facilitated by these social technologies, or the things that have been happening in the Middle East. We've had countries whose whole governments and ways of being have changed because of the use of technology and social technology. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting to keep an eye on is what's going to happen in the 2012 election, and how big of a role the use of these technologies are going to play. And so, like I said, for us in government, these are all very telling statistics. These are all trends that we have to keep in mind as we figure out how do we serve our constituents. The issues of digital divide for us really mean, when you're in the public sector, you have an obligation to serve all constituents equally. So how do you do that when you have issues of digital divide? So speaking of government, let me talk to you a little bit about California. Again, not any surprises to you that live here, but in California, the size of our government measured by budget is almost $130 billion a year. That was last year's budget. The largest programs, to no surprise, are in education, health and human services, transportation, and corrections, in that order. This presents some unique challenges for us in government. One, it's incumbent to recognize that our constituents have changed. What they have in their personal lives through the use of technology, they're going to expect from government. They want government on their terms, at their convenience, and in a very let's say mobile or convenient fashion, where they can transact business with government or get government services in a way that's convenient to them, and not have to go into an office and deal with folks there. In my job is to make sure that the state looks at the use of technology and invests in technology in a way that's smart and also meets the needs of our constituents. Now, there are some unique challenges in government that I think are going to continue to impede and impact the way that we're able to invest in those sorts of technologies. First of which is I think the budget is going to continue to be tight. The previous slide I was telling you, our annual budget is about $130 billion. The deficit this year, that's the gap between revenues and expenditures, is almost $21 billion. And that was at the beginning of the year. We're not even halfway through, and there's talk about revenues not coming in and additional cuts having to be made within existing budgets. So as I go in, or as the different agencies go in, before the Department of Finance, which manages our budget, or the legislature who has to appropriate the budget, at a time when they're considering cuts such as reducing the school year by a few days, cuts to health and human services programs or Medi-Cal, cuts to infrastructure, like physical infrastructure programs, and you say, yeah, we know all that's going on, but I'd still like $40 million to invest in a new technology system. It gets a little tough. So as a result, I think what we have been doing in government is looking at new models of how do you get technology in without having to put out all that money up front, or how do you bring technology in a way that generates additional revenues or savings for the state. I'll give you an example of a couple of procurement models that I think are really innovative. One of them is what we're calling a benefits-based procurement, where we are asking vendors to come in and say, okay, we have these issues. And I'll give you an example of it. One of them is our franchise tax board, our taxing agency. They have a lot of information about folks that don't pay their taxes, or that underreport, or companies that collect withhold taxes and don't submit them. But they're in different repositories all over the state. Some of them they control, some of them are at EDD, some of them are at different agencies, some of them are at the federal level. So what they've done is they've said, okay, we'd like a vendor to come in. We'd like you to connect all these different sources of revenue, develop correlations there, and help us to bring in additional revenue of taxes that are already owed. They're calling it enterprise data to revenue. The unique thing about this is that the way that we did it is we said, we don't want to pay you anything up front. What we want you to do is, if you have faith in your solutions and, your application of technology, we will pay you a percentage of all the additional revenue that comes in. So, in my mind, that's actually a pretty innovative way of doing things, investing in technology, getting results without having to put out a lot of money up front. I also suggested, because not only did Franchise Tax Board look at this, but now some of our other taxing agencies are starting to look at these sorts of investments in technology. I suggested to them that they change their motto. I told them, as FTB, if you get this thing going, you should change your motto to, we have what it takes to take what you got. So I don't know if they're going to actually do that, but if you haven't filed your taxes, I would suggest it. Do it in the next couple of years. So anyway, budget is going to continue to be an issue. Here's another big challenge for us in government. Every now and then, and all of you who work in technology know this, things don't always go exactly the way they're supposed to, right? In government, there really is very little tolerance for failure. If you invest in technology, some of them are going to work, some of your investments are going to work, some of them aren't quite going to pan out. In government, there's not a lot of tolerance for that. So what it means for us is that we have to be very, very selective. We have to make sure that there's a very sound business case for everything that we do. And I think we have to develop a little bit of tolerance for the fact that in some cases things are not going to work out the way that we think. That's hard to sell, again, in tough economic times or when taxpayers are being asked to cough up more. This is a big challenge for us. I don't know how it is in the private sector or out in the nonprofit sector, but what's happening in government is many of our most seasoned leaders, the folks that know the most about the way government runs, and even our technology systems, are at the age where they can age out. At the state level, they've had a couple of additional incentives to really consider retiring early. One is we had furloughs, where we started cutting people's salaries. We've had 4 or 5 years with no salary increases. Now they're starting to talk about revising the pensions for the public sector folks. So what that's causing is some of our most seasoned leaders are heading out the door. The other thing that's happening in government, again because of the budget situation, is that we're having to consider layoffs. And what happens when you do layoffs is that the newest in are the first ones out, right? And in our case, the newest in are some of the youngest, most technically savvy with the new technologies. So we're losing them at both ends, I guess, is what I would say. So it's a big challenge for us in government. Here's another big challenge for us in government. As we look at it, the digital divide isn't just about technology. In California, I think English is going to soon become a second language. There's a need to serve constituents equally. So as we put things forward, and you'll see in a few minutes a couple of examples of things that we have done. But you have to be able to serve people across the board. In some cases, the digital divide is a language issue or language barriers. In some cases, the digital divide is a cultural issue, or as folks have talked about here, maybe it's an issue of demographics. The age of our constituents, their facility to use technology devices, right? Either through the use of assistive gadgets. In some cases, it's just folks like my parents. I'll give you kind of a funny story. My dad is like 84 years old. And so the other day I was over at his house, and my younger son sent me a text on my little device, right? So I replied to him, and he's like, "Son, what is that?" And I said, "Oh, I'm communicating with Daniel, talking about coordinating a ride for him." And he goes, "I've been thinking about getting a cell phone too, but your mom doesn't want me to." I'm like, "Well, really, Dad, what do you need it for?" He goes, "Well, to communicate with her if I'm out and about, or if I'm going to be late, or if I need to get in touch with her." Now, my dad's 84 years old, and he doesn't drive all that much. He does drive still, but he basically drives to church. He drives to go visit my grandma, or drives to the grocery store. And I'm like, "Well, Dad, when you go to church, doesn't Mom go with you?" "Well, yeah, she goes with me." "Well, when you go to see Grandma's her mom, not your mom. Doesn't she go with you?" "Well, yeah, she goes." I said, "And when you go do the grocery shopping, she's kind of the one that does all of that too, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then what do you need a cell phone for?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know, but everybody has them." So, maybe that part of the digital divide is starting to get bridged in one form or another. But for us in government, as we deploy different systems, we have to look at how do we address that part of the digital divide. But in spite of these challenges, government is making some efforts. I want to share with you a couple of ideas and examples of things that we have done in government here, and specifically here in California. Let me see if I can get this to work. So that's the California State Portal. We're trying to put as much stuff as we can online for folks to be able to use it. But as you've all talked about here, I think we get 8 to 10 million hits and visits, unique visits, a month on this site. Through that, you have something like 700 different sorts of transactions that you can do with government, 100 million open data records so that folks can go in and get information from government. You have access to 1,000 live traffic cameras, and you have a 24/7 operator. But again, looking at those earlier statistics, not everybody owns a laptop or a desktop. So in recognition of that, we started to move to a mobile portal. We've established a mobile portal now, which gets really good traffic. In fact, the issue of looking up traffic, the traffic application, I guess, is probably our most popular application that we have on the website. The other thing that's kind of unique about this is that it's sort of device agnostic. You can use touch, you can use text. We built it in a way that it recognizes the device that you have. And if you have GPS in your device, it's also location aware. So if you go in there and say, "I'd like to find out where the nearest tax office is, or where the nearest DMV, or I'd like to check traffic conditions," it'll cater it to your own location. A lot of our agencies have started to put stuff online, such as driver's license exams, vehicle registration. Here are the examples of the park locator, Health and Human Services programs and where you find them. How do you find government services? But it's not all about just the mobile applications or technologies that revolve around the internet or even computers. The other area that we see as a means of using technology to address a digital divide is in the area of electronic payment cards. We have, especially in programs that serve the needy, we have a lot of folks that are unbanked, folks that don't have access to a checking account or a savings account. So we've started to move away from paper checks towards using electronic payment cards. And this is really important in our CalFresh program, which used to be the food stamps program, where you provide nutrition assistance to folks. In fact, I was going to share some statistics with you. A couple of years ago, we moved from paper checks to these electronic payment cards, to where now we distribute something like on the order of $10 billion a year in food stamp benefits or nutrition benefits through these electronic payment cards. If you think about it, this gives people the ability to not have to wait for a bank to open, not have to go to one of these check cashing places that charges you 10% or 3% to cash it. And you can use it as you need out in the retail market. We're also using this for unemployment insurance benefits. We're looking at maybe using it in some of the other benefit programs. In unemployment insurance, it's kind of interesting. We currently issue 800,000 unemployment insurance cards. In the past, that would have been monthly checks, 800,000 checks a month that go out every day, or every month, sorry about that. Think about the processing costs, the paper costs. What happens when you lose a check and it doesn't come in? This way you get a card and you just get a deposit made every month in there. It saved the state a lot of money. In the area of unemployment insurance as well, the other thing that we're using here, the other technology, is voice over IP. We've taken, some of you may have heard or may have read in the paper that when the unemployment situation spiked in California, I think our normal unemployment rate hovers around 5%. We're at about 12% currently. When things spiked, folks were trying to call in, and they were to apply or to find out if they were eligible, and some of them had 2-hour or multiple-hour waits, or they couldn't get through to our phone systems. So what we've done is we've taken applied VoIP technology to consolidate 16 different call centers into a virtual call center, a single virtual call center that takes calls that are coming in and then funnels them out to one by region, and then also to whoever is not busy at the time. It's really reduced our call waiting times, and again enabled us to serve consumers faster. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight here, I heard somebody say that they work in public safety. Interesting statistic here. I told you we run the network that provides support and connectivity to all the public safety answering points, all the dispatch and 911 centers. Last year, we had about 24 million 911 calls that were made into these dispatch centers. Interesting thing about that is that 77% of those calls came from mobile phones. Now, there's some, in a way it makes sense because, mobile phones, a lot of them are probably traffic accidents or things that happen out on the road. But there's some unique challenges with mobile phones. If you call from a landline, your address will show up there. You don't necessarily have an address associated with a mobile phone, and if you do, it might be your home address or your work address, but you may be in Bakersfield or in San Francisco versus Sacramento. So one of the things that we realized is we need to do something about our networks that support the public safety, both the emergency responders from the radio communications for emergency responders, as well as our 911 network. So we're in the process of using microwave and VoIP technologies to digitize that. To me, that's kind of interesting because although it's focused on public safety right now, our network goes up and down the state, including some very rural areas, very rural, very mountainous and remote areas. If we put in microwave technologies and we digitize these, maybe we create the opportunity for digital access in some very rural parts of the state. They're, as I said, right now they're dedicated to public safety, but who knows if with some innovative leadership up in Sacramento and along with the cooperation of local government, maybe we can leverage some of those for other purposes as well. Okay, so like I said, we do have our challenges in government. I don't expect those challenges to become any less in future years, but the bottom line is our constituents have expectations of government. Excuse me. And, I take it as my responsibility within our agency as the state tries to move forward in its investment of technologies that we really take a look at what's happening in the public sector, or in the public's private lives, and try to leverage any investments we make in technology to better serve them. And in my opinion, better serving them also means closing that digital divide, whether it's a digital divide, whether it's a cultural divide, whether it's an access divide. And looking at technologies, again, beyond internet technologies, beyond cell phone or computer technologies that can help close that divide. So, I guess that's what I wanted to share with you about what's going on in government. I do want to end on a little bit of a commercial here, though. So here's my commercial. This is essentially the organizational structure. I don't know. I gave this to my marketing group. I had it in nice, neat boxes with clean lines, and they did this. I guess it makes sense. It's futuristic. But essentially what you're seeing here is our organizational structure, and there's two sides to our agency. We have one whole side of our agency that provides technology services. You see them there. So that's our Office of Technology Services, our data center, our Public Safety Communications Office. We're doing work in GIS. We're doing work around enterprise technologies as well. And then on the other side is the whole policy side and the oversight side. These are the folks that provide leadership and guidance and review and approve what happens on the other, in terms of the other agencies investing in technology. But that one big yellow box that you see there, this is, we have a position actually, an assistant secretary position in an office dedicated to issues of digital literacy and expanding broadband. The problem is we have the vacancy there. We have the office, but we don't have a person there. So, Rochelle, if you could stand up for a second. Rochelle used to be that person. So if you guys can help me find somebody that, like Rochelle, for that position, that would be quite helpful to me. So, and I'm serious. I mean, we have the vacancy there. I have been looking. I've approached a few people, and unfortunately, Sonny talked about $100,000 worth of consultant or value here. Government doesn't pay that much. So I would say if you counted just the government, especially state government people, you might have maybe $300 worth of value here. But on the other hand, since you guys made a personal commitment and you're talking about civic responsibility, you have great, you'll get rewards in heaven if you come in and do your civic responsibility. Anyway, that was it. I just wanted to end up with that. I do want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. And Sonny, if we have time, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Let's give Secretary Ramos a round of applause. And we do want to take advantage of his willingness to answer questions. I think I want to kick this off with asking, as you listen to everyone, what would you want them to do in their region to most help you? What would be most helpful to your work and your mission here with the agency?
So I would say two things, really three things. So first one is, remember the slide before this. So if you see people that you think have that drive and that commitment to really close the digital gap, to help be a leader at a statewide level that can go out and talk to the private sector, talk to the to government sector, the local sector, the educational institutions. I really am looking for somebody in that regard. So if you know folks that have that drive and that commitment, send them my way. The other thing that I would be quite interested in is, as you see opportunities for government, specifically state government, to make an investment or to take an initiative or to serve some underserved community, let me know. If you see that there's a need out there. I sit in Sacramento, and I deal with a lot of different state agencies, but my hands really are not that close to the ground, or my ear isn't that close to the ground. I need eyes and ears out there. And then if you see things that are working well, that are good models that could be replicated, I would be really interested in hearing about that. Or if you yourself are involved in an initiative that you think needs support, needs to be promoted and maybe replicated throughout the state, that's an area where I think my office can really help. So I would say those are the things that I would ask.
That's excellent. As you were speaking, it occurred to me to just note that these regional consortia have formed and through the PUC are going to be funded for a period of 3 years, and probably a periodic gathering of the regional consortia would make sense, and having you participate so they could report progress to you
Sure.
would be a great thing
Sure.
to sort of institutionalize. Good.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, let's do Rochelle, and then we'll come back here. Yes.
So, Mr. Secretary, probably the most important thing that you could do to help this particular group would be when they have a problem, particularly with a state agency. So it could be a siting problem, a permitting problem, a political problem, gosh knows what. But there's a lot of problems. One of the things that I used to do when I worked for that agency was I would be a facilitator. So if there was a problem with Caltrans, I would call the Caltrans high person, like the deputy, and I'd make them meet with the project and facilitate that solution.
Sure.
The other thing that we would do is periodically we would hold one mass meeting where the grantees would come in and we would bring all the state agencies in, Fish and Game, Caltrans, et cetera,
Sure.
et cetera, lots of them, DGS, and we would just bring them all in and say, here's where they're at, this is what they're doing, and let's have a discussion about what are the problems right now and who can help. And just having that dialogue with the state agencies to resolve problems, because they're all under these terrible deadlines to build that are imposed by the federals. So, that leadership, that collaboration, just being one person in the state who would help them get those solved was really a huge, big deal. The last thing I'll say is we've been working a really long time when I was there on trying to have a sensible inventory of state poles that would be made available to communities to put their facilities on, state-owned poles. And that, in these rural areas particularly, is really important. We never got very far because everybody is very sensitive
Protected,
about their
sure.
list of poles, and nobody wanted to share the info. But
Sure.
there is actually a law in the books that says that we're supposed to have an inventory and to make them available. So I would just beg you to move forward with that project. I didn't
Okay.
get far enough with it when I was there.
That's good input. So let me just say a couple of things about that. Sonny mentioned that this agency is new, and at least as a cabinet level position. I've been really surprised at how many doors that actually opens. And so when I first came in, one of the first things I did is I spent probably the first couple of months just going around and meeting other cabinet members, other department directors. I didn't really want to talk to the IT people yet. Those of you who know IT people, you know why. But apart from that, I wanted to go out and actually make the connection with the policy side. One, because I wanted to know what are their policies, and in my view, technology is simply a tool. It's a tool to support policy and program at the state or operations. But I wanted to know what were their priorities. But also, I wanted to make that connection so that if I needed to call them, I'm not going to call a CIO. I'm going to call a director or a secretary, and you get very different responses from them. So I'm more than happy to use my position or my office to facilitate those sorts of coordination sort of activities. So yeah, if as you need them, let me know.
Excellent. Nicole, I think that is a live mic. Try it.
Great, thank you. So, Mr. Secretary, what's your preference for communication? How do you personally like to receive communication? And also, one other question.
Okay.
Are there going to be field reps that we can also contact that are actually in the field or field offices to come in and lean on?
So personally, I prefer I prefer digital communication. I like email. So if you don't do email, then certainly call my office and just leave a message for me. I'm really pretty good at trying to get back to folks. I'm not always really timely, but I will get back to you. But email, because it makes it easier for me to capture what the issue is, and it makes it easy for me to send it to a director of Caltrans and say, hey, we need to talk about this. So I do prefer that. In terms of field reps, my staff, the folks that work for my agency, are primarily in Sacramento. We do have a few folks that go out into the field, but those are primarily the guys that climb the towers and install microwave dishes or go out and repair stuff. So if you need to get a hold of me, unfortunately, it probably is through Sacramento, or I do get out and about within California to events such as this, so you can certainly catch me there, and my staff do as well. So.
And thank you. And the final question from Barbara O'Connor.
We're canceling our meeting so you can get home before traffic, so I'll just ask you one. Rochelle Michelle asked the question I really wanted. And the corollary to that is, what do we do about obfuscation on applications? When we know that the technology exists, we don't have a kind of interoperability council, and we need one. And I cite as an example 4 emails I just got on wireless about the ability to text political contributions for the FPPC. Well, that's contingent on having a network, but in lots of places we have them, carriers are saying they can't do it in California, which is just not true. So can you serve as kind of the applications guidance counselor as well? Because there isn't one. I mean, Jerry
Sure.
used to have one. There isn't really an
Sure.
agency, and no Secretary of BT&H. So.
Sure. So again, with the position of secretary, and actually before I answer that question, I just want to say I'm a CSUS alumni.
I'm
and
proud
Comm
you're a
Studies
Sac
major,
State grad.
so
Yes.
undergraduate in Comm Studies. So
Yes.
I like.
We're
that.
proud of you too, Carlos.
So in terms of using my office as a bully pulpit, let's say with carriers or with the private sector, a lot of them really want to be nice to me. I don't know why, but maybe it's because they want to do business in California or with government. So yes, I'm happy to be that. I have done that at times. Usually around initiatives that are state initiatives, but I'm happy to do that sort of coordination and facilitation as well.
Great, thank you, and join me, everybody,
Oh, okay.
in
Yes.
thanking Carlos.
Email address. So I apologize. I thought I had it on here, but my email address is carlos.ramos, that's spelled R-A-M-O-S, at state.ca.gov, G-O-V. Anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and hopefully I'll get invited back.
Thank you. So you're not only invited back, it is a standing invitation, at least annually, and we want to keep you informed. This has been a great kickoff. Thank you. Thank you so
very
much,
much.
Carlos. Thank you. Yay.